Boom shakalaka, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters around the world. It is your chocolate Nubian soul brother, the esoteric noetic, and we are going to delve into one of the most powerful conversations dealing with the state that I have ever listened to, featuring none other than my favorite libertarian, Adam Kokesh. Adam discusses the state, how to dismantle it, the problem with it, so eloquently with Joe Rogan. One of the things I love about Adam Kokesh is he is the personification of libertarian Zen, in that he expresses the truth, expresses the whole idea, the philosophy of freedom in the right way, without triggering people. He does it with compassion. He talks about something called the love illusion, which is obviously plain words with revolution. Whereas we're all trying to start a revolution here, Adam does this with compassion, does this with the most amount of consideration and emotional intelligence that I've seen expressed by any mainstream activist for freedom. And this conversation that he has with Joe Rogan, I think, is the coup de grace of how to talk to people, regardless of who they are, about freedom. And I love it because it nuts out the fundamental issue, where it all starts, with the financial system, with taxation is theft. More often than not, you say that as a libertarian, and most people will say, "What are you talking about? It's not theft." Anyway, let's get into this conversation Adam Kokesh has with Joe Rogan on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I'm going to give you my thoughts in regards to it.
Well, yeah, I think part of my own philosophical development and my own experience going through to the point where I feel like I got to, you never get all the way to the bottom, but like to the effective bottom of the rabbit hole for me, that allows me to function the way that I do now with my current understanding of the world. Part of it was having a philosophical approach. Like there's a quote from a Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm sure I'm butchering the name, but it's something like when someone does harm to you, it is only because harm has been done to them and they are reflecting it back and they are expressing it. And to me, I see that is what government as a whole is, in the sense that it's pathological behavior. It is a relic of human evolution, of the scarring of the only way we were able to raise kids in the state of nature was you beat them so they keep up with the tribe, and the evolution of that into government. And I see that as George Bush simply a representation of that broader social phenomenon of government being the last manifestation of this desire to control and dominate and use violence against others. And so he's just, and it's not that the president is a pitchman or a puppet. He's a power broker. He legitimately makes decisions. But the reason the one who usually gets in the position is the one that is because he's reflective of the environment that produces him. And that's the existing power structure. And that's the paradigm of society as a whole. And that's why changing the paradigm and waking people up and the perspective that you share about government is so powerful, because what ultimately determines whether or not you are going to be free is whether the human beings around you agree that you should be free, and they won't tolerate people initiating force against you when you're acting peacefully.
That is such a salient point. It's so brilliantly expressed, because I feel, whereas a lot of us have a lot of this hate within us, particularly when we're speaking to people that have different viewpoints, different ideologies, that are very much against freedom, their status, or people that care little about your rights as an individual and care more about what they want, their own safety. You know what I'm talking about if you've ever had a conversation with someone in regards to human rights, in regards to liberty. And Adam talks about how ultimately your environment is not going to change unless the people around you are on board with that. And losing control of yourself and starting with these ad hominem attacks, making them feel like shit, telling them that they are the problem, is not going to resolve the problem. And Adam's approach of realizing that when people lash out at you, more often than not, they have gone through some kind of pain themselves, and they're simply lashing out. They're expressing that pain. Obviously, responding with an eye for an eye, that kind of mentality isn't going to do anything. And you see the way that Adam communicates with people. He doesn't play this, "Oh, you've said something horrible towards me." For instance, I recently watched a conversation Adam had with Stefan Molyneux, who was making a less effective libertarian argument in regards to open borders. And look, whereas I feel as if Stefan Malny was being a little cheap with some of the things that he was saying, some of the statements he was making against Adam Kokesh. Adam kept his cool, and it's the fundamental thing that you find with all the conversations that Adam Kokesh has with people. Always maintains a zen, and I think it comes from this grounding where he, as he expressed with this quote, that ultimately, because he understands that when people are lashing out, it's because of the pain within them, he doesn't respond with that anger. And it's one of the most difficult things to do. It is the Buddhist Zen approach. Most of us know how to get frustrated, obviously, and speak passionately about something, but to speak with passion and compassion is one of the most difficult things any person can do. So I salute Adam Kokesh. I think it's absolutely brilliant, the approach that he has. Anyway, let's let him go on.
So the only way to do that is to make them happier. That's the real trick. You gotta get them to lighten the fuck up. Things are not that bad. You know, you really look in perspective, things are not that bad.
Well, one of my biggest philosophical influences is Stefan Molyneux, and he went through a whole process of describing this anarcho-capitalist ideal society, and really to embrace this philosophy, you kind of have to go through all of the resistances that people have, like, without government, who's going to build the roads, you know? And it's the same question as people would ask when we were trying to abolish slavery. And it was, but without the slaves, who's going to pick the cotton?
I don't think there's anything wrong with having a form of council. You know, the idea of calling them government, and like what the Obama administration was able to do, what the Obama administration was able to do in this whole Operation Fast and Furious, where he was able to, just say, I don't want to talk about it, and what is it, invoking executive order or whatever?
Privilege, yeah.
Executive privilege. I mean, how silly is that? You just there's a giant scandal where they sold guns to Mexican drug dealers, and they said, oh, yeah, we're just going to track them.
Well,
and then one of those guns killed one of the
Border Patrol agent, yeah.
Like, the idea that he would be able to use executive privilege and get out of that, and to do it so blatantly. Like that's a creepy thing. Like, you can't have things like that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that kind of shit. Like, but that's what I'm saying. Like, in a form of council, that would never exist. In a form of dictatorship, that's where something like that exists.
Well,
it's a get out of jail free pass.
It's what do you think that you need government to accomplish, and how can you do it?
I think
instead of having an arbitrary.
We like leaders, and the lead, but I think the leaders should be
anti-political. It's anti-leaders. It's anti-authoritarian. It's saying we're not going to allow ourselves to be cowed. We are going to understand that as human beings, in what we call the free market, we are able to cooperatively accomplish all the things that we have been convinced we need government for.
Right, I understand that, but someone's going to have to execute decisions. Someone's going to have to put things in motion. You're going to have to...
That's fine, Joe, but it needs to be done voluntarily. A lot of people use the word government in a different understanding. The way in which libertarians, someone like Adam Kokesh, is using the word government, we're speaking those that have a monopoly on violence, those that are able to initiate violence. So provided you have a council, it's voluntary, and this council hasn't set itself up by extorting people through tax, that's completely fine. Provided it is voluntary and the decisions that are sorted out through the free market, completely fine. But one of the reasons I love this conversation is because the deeper you go, Adam Kokesh is able to go into the heart of the problem and analyze where the flawed thinking is in Joe's logic here. And I'm going to let this play, and let's see how this unfolds.
The group people that are going to vote on things.
Give me examples. What is it?
Anything that needs to get done, whether you're not, you have, you might not have a consensus of how many cops need to be hired, as opposed to how many teachers need to be hired,
community
or how much they should get.
The people paying for those services.
Right. How do they do that? They do that with a form of government. They get together. They have council.
No, they do it through corporations. They do it through companies where they're able to buy protection services, where they're able to get the legitimate services that police provide without forcing it on people just because they happen to be their neighbors.
Even teachers. Even deciding what salaries are. You're going to have some sort of a way that people can interact with each other, and someone's going to have to execute it.
That's called the free market.
Yeah, but but that person who executes it should be someone of respected counsel, someone who's we could take advantage of the fact that there's people that are older and more brilliant.
Why was Steve Jobs the CEO of Apple? What made Steve Jobs the CEO of Apple?
Very creative guy. Started off
market forces. He was the most valuable one to be in the command of those market resources.
Damn, Kokesh is good. Damn, he's good.
So you want to turn the government and how things run into just a big free market, as far as police, as far as teachers, everything's just a giant free market.
I want to take the violence out of it. I want to take the coercion out of it. I want it to be accomplished peacefully by people cooperating instead of saying, oh, well, you live here, you're going to pay these taxes. Oh, well, you live here, you're going to be under these rules.
But someone's going to have to organize how the hospital gets kept up. Is that going to be a public thing, or is that going to be, I mean, you opposed to everything public?
Look at how much more
public education? Are you opposed to public...
I'm opposed to education that's funded by violence.
Exactly. You can get anything you want in this world, but you have to do it without using violence. Can't use extortion. Yeah, it's great to have things like schools, education. Great to have things like medicine, healthcare. But what you can't do is you can't extort people. Can't extort money from people and then use that to fund your hospitals. And say that because we need to have a system where decisions can be made, we're going to base that off of coercive violence. So when I say coercive violence, anytime you set up an organization and you do that by forcing people to give out their money so that you can use that money to run your organization, that's illegitimate. That's what Adam Kokesh is referring to as government. It's so damn good, this conversation.
How's it founded by violence? What do you mean by that?
You think a child going to school doesn't understand that if they don't go to school every day, their parents get in trouble, and that the way the school is paid for is by taxes that the parents pay against their will, whether or not they have children in a school system? Children get that. They understand that. We grow up, but this is the status paradigm.
Okay, but that's a one-way way of looking at it. It's also true that parents pay taxes in a very specific neighborhood because they know there's a good school system in there, and then they run rallies for the school system, and they gather up money, and people donate.
Right, and so
that's also true. I see that,
and so that
involving
element,
community schools
right,
as well.
That
it's not always negative.
Okay, that aspect of it, however, is superior, is it not, to the Federal Department of Education coming into that community and saying, now you're going to follow these testing standards in order to get these funds, and if you don't do what we say with this. So all I'm saying is...
It's nice that a careful community...
yes, you see that
helps.
Difference. So that community should be determined not by people.
Right, but how is it violence? I mean, how is this? Is the money paying the teachers? How is that coming from violence?
Oh, it's quite simple, Joe. If I tell you to give me a certain amount of money so that I can use that to fund schools and fund healthcare, that's not right. I mean, I can ask you for it, but if I tell you that you must give up this amount of money and you decide not to, and then I decide to put you in jail or use some kind of violence on you, that is violent. Anytime where you're asking someone to do something and it's voluntary, completely fine. Anytime when you're telling them that they have to do it, otherwise you will use force in order to get what you want, that's what you call coercive violence. And that's what the government does in many situations. If the government did not do that, you could still call the government, and it would not be a violent thing. It would simply be a society that is run through voluntarism, and therefore would be a free society.
I don't understand.
How do you pay taxes? What happens if you don't pay taxes?
Well, you're not contributing to society. I mean, I don't think we should be paying as much taxes as we are.
You're not contributing to war.
I don't think
you're not contributing to corruption.
That is true. But so do you think that all taxes are bad? Do you think that we should have no taxes?
All taxes are immoral.
All taxes are immoral. So how do we...
Yes, Joe. All taxes are immoral. If I come up to you and I punch you in the face and then I give you a sandwich, it doesn't change the fact that that's assault. Now, granted, you may benefit from that sandwich, and that sandwich may make you feel like the greatest person in the world, may improve your life in 1,001 different ways. And maybe, in hindsight, you would have been happy that you got that sandwich. But here is the fact of the matter. It was still assault. If you take money from someone and then you give them something, whether or not they want it or don't want it, it's still theft. This is an immutable fact, and it scares me, the fact that people want to gloss over this.
Expect to pay for the city streets? How do we expect to pay to maintain some sort of a presence with police officers?
Only material. You're making a appeal to probability fallacies. You're not going to be able to address a lot of issues, and because X and Y may happen, because if you don't raise the money to do all of this kind of stuff, sure, it could create problems, but it doesn't change the fact that if you're taking money by force, it's still theft.
Officers and fund them with cars? Is it all just donations?
No. Well, this is the difference between what we have with government and what we already have in the free market.
Do people pay for protection then? Does it become
exactly.
the cops
and you
become
can do
protection?
it at the community
You think
level.
that sounds like a good idea?
You can do it at the
private
community
cops
level.
that decide to not save you because you didn't pay for protection.
The difference is
Nothing wrong with that, Joe Rogan. I don't have to protect people if I am an individual. This is the thing that people do. They think that we live in this collective system where people have to sacrifice themselves to help others. Granted, that's what you should do, but you can't force people to do that. If someone is a cop, or whether they're part of any organization for that matter, I mean, at the end of the day, if they want to help you, that's all good and well. If they don't want to, they don't have to. But saying that people should be compelled to help you is where people go wrong. You can't force people to sacrifice themselves to help you and say that because they don't do that, they need to face some kind of punishment, or to ensure that these cops help everyone, we're going to force everyone to pay tax. That becomes something that is built off of an immoral foundation. Therefore, it is immoral.
with them, all you get is protection, whereas with the police today, do we get protection?
Sometimes
No.
you do.
That's
No,
not-
that's not true. I know good cops. There's good cops out there. Man.
Okay, well, what
there's
did-
not all bad. All cops are not bad. Just because some cops do a bunch of stupid shit, and those guys in the video with you were clearly bad.
Okay,
cops.
so wouldn't you? This is the mechanism by which you separate the good cops from the bad cops.
Their
The
actions.
No. This is the mechanism by which you actually do it. Is you
I feel like Joe's getting a little tense here because he knows that his argument is kind of falling apart. But that's just my impression.
take the arbitrary power of government away from them. You make them serve the market. You make them serve the people peacefully. You make them convince you that their services are necessary, not put a gun to your head and say, if you don't pay our taxes, you're going to get locked in a cage.
Precisely.
Well, I think that locking someone in jail for taxes is very unfortunate, and it doesn't make sense when you think about how many fucking gigantic corporations have gone bankrupt and how much more that affected people than, one person is not paying their little tiny slice of the military-industrial complex's pie.
Okay.
But you should have to pay something. It should make sense. You're getting.
Why should you have to pay something, Joe? Can you force someone to pay something because you want the world to be a better place? I mean, is there anything that you think people should be forced to pay for? I mean, look, if I want to have a world where everyone is able to play awesome computer games, hey, that's one of my pastimes. I enjoy playing computer games. To ensure that everyone is able to get access to playing computer games, should I force everyone to pay tax? Okay, what about something like healthcare? What about something like charity? Any kind of charity. It doesn't matter. You can't force people to do something because you think it's for the greater good. You're violating their own individual freedom to do so. And that's the fundamental distinction between collectivism and individualism. That's the fundamental distinction between what makes someone libertarianish and what makes someone a libertarian.
Getting something out of it, and you should want to contribute.
Sure, you should want to, but that's your own subjective opinion. This is what people do. They always make these subjective arguments. Yeah, granted, that's your opinion. You should want to, but you can't force someone to want to, and you sure as hell can't force someone to do that.
I live in a community, and if everybody said, "Well, hey man, our streets are all fucked up," but Mike gathered up all the names that everybody lives here and realized if we all just chip in $100, we could fix this whole thing. I think it's worth it for me for $100. Are you in? And everybody goes, "Yeah." Well, that would be beautiful.
When you say everybody goes, "Yeah, sure," if everybody agreed to that, not a problem. But if someone doesn't want to agree to that, and then you force them to, and you lock them up in jail, because they're not willing to give up a certain amount of money to do whatever it is that you want, it's still immoral. I always used to find things like that frustrating when people were trying to raise money for a particular charity event or for someone's birthday, and one person tries to convince everyone to give up a certain amount of money. That's fine, but when one person doesn't want to give up a certain amount of money, everyone has an issue with them. And when the reality is, they don't have to give up a certain amount of money to buy so that we can all buy our friend a present. I mean, if they don't want to participate, they don't have to. This idea people have where, hey, we have to do everything together as a team, it just doesn't work in the real world because everyone is an individual. Sometimes people don't want to contribute. And if they don't, fair enough. They shouldn't be able to benefit from whatever it is that you're, as a group, creating. But you can't force people to contribute because you have some idea that you think is worth doing.
That's what I'm talking about.
That'd be
That's
beautiful.
not government. That's great. That's
That'd be
exactly
beautiful.
But see, technology allows us all the
If
ways.
we didn't
to
have
do
jobs, if we didn't have responsibility, children, careers, if we didn't have things we had to think about all day, instead you're running around there trying to fucking figure out how to pay the firemen and how to make sure that the cop tires are good, and at a certain point in time, I mean, how much micromanagement can you do in your fucking community?
Well, how is it for cable now? Internet, TV in your house. How is it that you get that without government?
But you propose that for things that we think of as civil services, right? You propose that for like cops.
Well, look at how.
And I just think
much
that
has developed.
that becomes tricky, man.
Well, the
Private
question
cops,
is
it's
tricky.
mercenaries. Think about what the fuck is going on in Iraq right now.
Mercenaries are only made. The problem with mercenaries is that they do things that the government funds them to do that the market would never support them doing.
Well, guess what, man?
In
You
the market,
privatize
people
cops.
only want cops to do legitimate things. The only way that you have
Why do people have such an issue with privatizing cops? If I want to hire someone to help me out or to protect me, yeah, sure, I should be able to do that. If I voluntarily want to live in a society where I pay a certain amount of money so a group of people protect me, once again, completely fine. But this whole idea where it has to be done, where people have to be forced to pay a certain amount of money so that we can have this protection, and then we can have this governmental system. I don't understand how people make that argument. At the end of the day, there isn't a single thing the government can do that can't be done voluntarily.
mercenaries doing things that are immoral is because it's funded by government in the first place.
Okay, I can see that argued easily. If they don't have a specific set of rules and are only open to the market, they're going to push as far as they possibly fucking can to get things done. And if they're dealing with businesses that have a lot of money, they're going to do things that aren't legal. But that's what would happen if you privatize the cops. And that's a fact. That's just how human beings are.
I hate when people say stuff like that. They say it's to definitively affect how someone's going to behave. Yeah, some people may do that, some people may not do that. But to make a definitive statement like that, like, oh, wait a second, the cops are going to behave like this because that's just what happens. Anarchy happens in a negative connotation. So you have absolute chaos. Anytime you try to create a system where there aren't any rules, there isn't any governing body, it just creates insanity. Everyone starts behaving like douchebags and criminals. No, Joe, that might happen, but you know what? It doesn't happen in certain situations. I hate how people always speak about these things definitively as if there is no other alternative. It needs to be done this way. People said that you needed to have slaves. You couldn't have a society functioning. People said that in every point in history that this was the only way to do things. Traveling had to be done by horse. There was no other practical way to do so. It just shows the lack of imagination so many people have.
Loopholes, and you allow them to figure out how to get through those loopholes. They're like rats on a sinking ship, and they're going to pop out and they're going to fuck things up.
No, because you're basing that on an understanding of the corporate structure of the current government paradigm, where government empowers corporations to have an unnatural advantage in the market and protects them from competition.
But
damn, Kokesh is slick. Fucking love this guy, and yet so calm. Brilliant. And this is in 2013. He's just getting wiser and calmer as he gets older. I love this shit.
Man.
Hold on, no. In your scenario, you say rich people, like existing corporations and concentrations of wealth, would abuse this ability to hire police forces and private whatever to be able to do evil things. Well, guess what? They already can. The thing is, what we have is a government that keeps the rest of us from doing the same thing, from being able to say that our demands for community safety services, our demands should be met by the market, not by a monopoly that's forced on us. This is why this is the premise of the drug war, man. You do this, the drug war goes away. You do this, all unjust laws go away, because the demands on the enforcers are the demands of the market. They're what people actually want. The bad cops go away because you get to fire them. There's no police unions that say you can't fire people because, and there's going to be a law against this, that if a cop shoots somebody, he's going to get paid leave. You know, that kind of bullshit. All of that goes away. When you have roads, like I was telling you, in the way that they're holding us back from technological development, but specifically like in New Mexico, where the Speaker of the House gets to just say, well, put that intersection by my land so the value of it goes up. All of that goes away. And to say that, well, we need violence
so corruption goes away.
Yes.
How does corruption go away?
Because in order to make money in the free market, so
the free market makes corruption go away.
Well, hold on a second. The capitalist ideal is that as free individuals, multiple parties are able to engage in trade because it's of mutual benefit, right? Uh-huh. I give you something, you give me something. We both believe that we're better off from it. This is the basic concept of capitalism, of free trade,
forced altruism,
of application of yourself as a capital resource engaged in the free market. And anytime you introduce coercion into that, you take away from our ideal potential as humanity to engage in commerce.
Of course, I got no argument with that.
So that's what government does. And so if you had the ability now, as we do technologically, obviously, to pool resources to come together.
But you're saying, you're calling government, you're defining human nature as government. You're saying anybody would...
No, he's defining government as any entity, any entity that uses the initiation of violence. It has a monopoly on the initiation of violence. So it can actually do that and say that it's legitimate because they are the government. Of course, human nature is going to prevail. There are going to be people that behave like dickheads. People always talk about, at least some people, talk about the whole concept of anarcho-capitalism, libertarianism as being utopian. It has nothing to do with utopianism. Now, granted, a lot of people make the argument that, yes, it's going to create a better society, and yes, many libertarians actually feel that way, but it's not based off of the idea that it's going to create the best society. It's based off of the idea of first principles, like of self-ownership. It's based on the idea that, granted, theoretically, and granted it's theoretically, people believe that it would. That's not the basis for it. The basis for it is because it's just, it's actually moral. Now, granted, you know, honestly, now granted, a lot of libertarians won't say this. It is possible that you're going to have a lot of violence, and you're still going to have a lot of coercion, and you're going to have a lot of shit, because there are always going to be douchey people. But unlike a government system, that stuff is not accepted as far as it being based on the setup of the system. People being able to use violence is not a legitimate thing. We don't have laws saying that it's moral now. When people behave badly, it's universally badly. For one person to do something, if it is wrong, it's wrong for another person to do something, regardless of what entity they're a part of. When it comes to a governmental system, one person that is part of the government entity can do things that are immoral that another person cannot do.
With power, you're defining that as government.
No,
I'm just saying that would happen in your private cop system too.
Right. No,
probably worse.
Right. What I'm saying is that government is the current manifestation of human desires to control and dominate others by force. Right. This is the premise of.
And that's the only way to govern, is what you're saying.
Well,
the only way to govern
is the definition of governing.
And without that, it's impossible to have like a compassionate leadership. It's impossible.
No, with that you have cooperation. You have leadership of people that are doing good work.
So that's a government.
No.
What is the leadership then? If there's not, if there's a leadership, you got a government. If you got
one word, voluntary. Provided it's being done voluntarily, it is not a government as such. That's the only thing to keep sight of.
Someone who's leading, you got a government.
Not
so you got another government. You got a benevolent government.
You think Steve Jobs wasn't a leader in the technological field?
I think Steve Jobs was a general of Apple.
Absolutely. So was he government?
Yes.
You think Steve Jobs was government?
For sure. If you
what he was doing, look, if people didn't want to buy his products, don't have to. If people didn't want to work for Steve Jobs, don't have to. With the government, hey, if you don't want to pay tax, they'll lock you up and put you in a jail cell. Do you see the distinction, Joe?
Well, if you were involved with Apple, if you were involved with Apple and you left your phone, the prototype phone, in a bar somewhere, even though it's awesome free publicity, you would be arrested, or they would for sure. They check the guy, they fucking stormtroop his house with machine guns.
Yeah, if you had signed a contract when you were working for Apple that you had to conduct yourself in a particular way, and you violated that contract, then yes, you'd be subject to the penalties, repercussions from violating that contract. Now, the problem with the governmental system is that there is no contract in play. People just come up with this airy-fairy idea of a social contract and say, because of this, we're going to behave in this way where we cast down repercussions upon you, even though you have not voluntarily agreed to this contract.
Looked everywhere for the iPhone. Then, I mean, is that not like what the government would do? That's exactly what the government would do. And then they fire the guy. That's exactly what the government would do. Yeah, so I'd say Steve Jobs was the government.
Okay, well then we're still sort of talking about it.
I mean, if that is a corporation, I mean, if that is the real free market, I mean, the corporation is the village of Apple.
Okay, but you're throwing up these objections that are justifications for government.
Totally not objections.
Okay,
this is all just devil's advocate.
Okay, devil's advocate, but then it's an important thing to say. But like I said, when you were living under slavery and someone said, "Hey, we need to end slavery," the devil's advocate was saying, "But who's going to pick the cotton?" And the answer is, if you understand.
I'm not saying that you should.
Well, it's like
be
without
under
government,
the thumb of an oppressive government. I'm saying.
Well, you kind of are. It comes down to degrees. You're saying that the government should have a monopoly on initiating violence in the form of tax, but you're saying when it's done on something that is more egregious, like actually openly saying that we're going to lock you up unless, of course, you give up your guns, or on other areas you're in line with that. You're not being consistent across the board.
And can't we have people that we really love and respect, real leaders? Because if you look at a guy like Bill Clinton now that he stopped chasing tail and everything,
what makes you think he stopped?
You think he stopped?
No, guys like that don't stop.
You don't think so? Imagine those girls and their hard drives, Clinton dick pics. If they wouldn't stop, there'd be Clinton dick pics, man. Don't you think? They'd be worth so much money. How could the girls keep their mouths shut?
Do you know how many people Clinton has killed?
I wonder how many people Clinton has killed. Do you think he's killed a lot of people?
No, but I think after you suck his dick, you get a little briefing.
Do you think that? Did you ever read The Strange Death of Vince Foster? Do you know the story behind that guy? It's one
All
of
right,
the guys.
so I'm going to leave it there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thought that was a brilliant conversation because it went into the fundamental crux of libertarianism, which is the taxation of theft. It all starts with extortion through taxes, and from there, the government is able to have a monopoly on violence or use those dollars that is created in order to fund the military-industrialized complex and do a whole bunch of other things that are not necessarily good. But unfortunately, people like Joe often don't understand the idea that, granted, there are plenty of things that we would be better off if we all did ubiquitously as a society. When you force people to do these things and say that it's a government entity that has the right to force people to do things like that, you're creating a violent monopoly. Call it what you will. It doesn't matter if you want to call it government, you want to call it a monarchy, it's still wrong. It's a violation. And of course, a lot of people get frustrated with libertarians because the good ones, not the libertarianish people, the good ones like Adam Kokesh that actually really get the heart of this, always make that point very, very clear. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let us know what you think. And put your support towards Adam Kokesh. Apparently he's running for non-president or something along those lines for 2020. He's got this whole campaign going on, and I'm definitely on board with what he's doing. I think he's absolutely amazing. I think we need more strong advocates like Kokesh that are able to have dialogue with people and do it in a very zen-like manner. Peace out, keep it real. Ow! Until next time, the Esoteric Noetic signing out.